Hey, everybody, it's Brian Doyle from MSP Business School, and I want to welcome you back either from celebrating Canada Day or the 4th of July last week. That said, we are going to play a very special episode for you today. As many of you know, I do open coaching sessions every Tuesday, and this was one of our most popular coaching sessions where we go into the 5 TBR killers and what you can do to make sure that you don't fall into those traps. So I hope you enjoy. Give it a listen now. That being said, I've now just opened up chat, so attendees can chat with me here as well. And our Q&A is going to go up in the side as well. So if you do have any questions that you'd like answered along the way, you can put them into the Q&A. Now, what I really want to talk about are 5 really destructive things that I see happen all the time when I'm bringing on new clients, or bad habits I see my existing clients fall into when they come in and go, "Hey, we're getting stuck. Can you help, Bri?" And these 5 things are really items that I think, we all can work on. We can all certainly improve upon. And the first one is getting the right people in the room. When you think about our QBR efforts, one of the biggest challenges are how do we, or forget about the QBR for a minute, our relationships with our clients. How do we reach up in the organization? How do we make sure that the moves that we're making on behalf of the customer are being shared organically throughout the organization? How do we make sure we know what's happening at the ground floor and taking the right action to improve what we do for our customer? I was blessed when I kicked off my first MSP back, and I'll age myself as always here, back in 2001. We had just started getting, obviously we're originally a break fix, but did get into the managed services game pretty early with monitoring in 2003. And one of the best resources I had was my partner, who was our engineer, our initial, lead engineer. He was great at just engaging people in the office. He would work with those different people at the ground level, hearing what's going on, learning what the organization's thinking about doing. Are they bringing in new applications? Are they hiring? Are they firing? Those kind of things. And he would back channel that to me all the time with the caveat, don't use this for 6 weeks. Don't use this for 4 weeks, those kind of things. But the reality, what really hit me very quickly in that concept is he was connected at levels I didn't necessarily penetrate to. So how can I penetrate those levels and build better relationships with my customers? When I worked in a mid-market organization, so my backstory for those that don't know, I ran an MSP that also had data centers when we had our successful exit there. I then went to a mid-market enterprise MSP that was catering to large organizations to kind of get some exposure on that side and bring another couple data centers to life. And when I got there, there was a kind of an old saying, we want to do the sign of the cross. I'm not looking to bring religion into today's conversation, but it was more about you want to know 3 people up from your contact, 3 people down from your point of contact, 3 people to the left, and 3 people to the right. Well, of course, in some of our small to mid-sized businesses, we might not have that, depth of bench, if you will, to get engaged with. But what it really told me is you got to get beyond that single point of contact. So when we have that single point of contact relationship, we can have a wonderful relationship with that person. But the risk that's always on the table is that person might leave or that person might change their opinion of us, right? So if our single point of contact is our only communication point within that organization, it's going to be tough to remain sticky in tough times. It's going to be tough to have communicated to the upper executives what the value is of our agreement when we get things on lockdown, right? The more we automate, the more we do remotely, the less we're on site and less things break. And if that's only shared in knowledge with the single point of contact that we work with, we are going to find ourselves in very difficult position at some point in time. So we want to move beyond that single point of contact. And really, I want to expand my kind of my circle of trust inside that organization in 3 different areas. The first 2 are pretty obvious areas. I'd like to reach up into the finance person's, the financial person in the organization, whether that's just the next manager on the financial journey, at least they're one level up from my single point of contact, right up through the CFO. I want to understand more about what they're doing. Obviously, in getting these folks into our relationship, we're now starting to understand, hey, what other financial objectives are going on? If I know I have a big refresh year, but they're telling me that they're about to buy a new building, that could very much impact their ability to buy PCs too. Is that something I've got to adjust for? Is that something I got to learn? How do we get a regular face to face here? And of course, that's what the goal of the technology business review is. Same with the CEO or business owner. Again, the biggest risk there is when things are going well. The more things are on autopilot, the more they're not seeing us on site or seeing heavy engagement from us. That's the faster these resources are going to look at the bill. Why are we paying so much? Everything seems to be on lockdown. What else are they doing for us? Because in many cases, they don't know we're part of the strategic plan as well. But when we get those people into the room, we can start sharing points that are going to echo with what they do in their roles and responsibilities in the job. And that's really a key component of building out these relationships, really making sure you understand where that person across you is coming from and how you can meet them where they live. And you'll probably hear that again today. And the final component is starting to bring in some line of business managers and stakeholders. I just told you a few minutes ago about my old partner who was really talented at getting information from the ground floor. Those stakeholders, those line of business managers, they tend to be the people closest to the actual technology use. They're going to be the ones that know which machines are running slow and costing them productivity or even costing them in manufacturing terms the ability to get product outside the door. They're going to know the challenges from an efficiency level that their teams are experiencing and where those challenge points are. And some of those challenge points might never make it to your single point of contact because those people might not have regular touch bases either. So if we can get a line of business or stakeholder in there in conjunction with the CFO and CEO, now we're really assembling a team. And when we go to these QBRs, if these people are in the room, we can really ask a lot of different questions, very direct to the resource that owns it, and get the feedback we need to build better cyber programs, to eliminate risk inside that business, to harness AI and use it more effectively for productivity, to educate our customers and truly become that trusted advisor. But if you're not getting these people in the room, you're going to see it's going to be very tough to get the meetings on the schedule because your single point of contact is going to say, look, I talk to you on the regular anyway. This is great, but I don't think we need to do it, at least not as much. And that's a concern. And if these other three resources aren't coming to the table, they've told you in no uncertain terms, we don't know what your real value is. You're a commodity. If somebody comes in cheaper, we might consider it. If somebody comes in and tells me something that you just never shared with me, I might consider it, right? And certainly if your single point of contact leaves, you're in a tough spot. So we want to make sure that, objective number one for today is getting the right people in the room to come to your QBRs. The second key objective you've got to do, and the big mistake I see, is not keeping the meeting on track. A QBR is obviously a meeting for both parties, but really we have to dictate what this meeting's going to be and the purpose of this meeting up front with our customers. So how do you keep any meeting on track? Set an agenda, but more importantly, set an agenda in advance and share it with the customers. Now, those of you that are in this call that are VCIO Toolbox clients, you may have saw in our last release, we now have the ability to send those agendas out automatically to your end users from the system so they can get those agendas prior to the meeting starting. And they can then contribute back to you and add to that agenda if they have something that they want to cover. But more importantly, that agenda is going to help lay out what your intentions are during the meeting, what your objectives are. We need to take control of the meeting. Soon as the customer takes control of the meeting, they're going to, we lose the opportunity to keep it on the narrative that we want to drive. So what does that really mean? Okay, whether or not you send that agenda in advance, if you're not bringing it up at the start of the meeting, again, the customer doesn't have an expectation. We need to give them an expectation because everything that we're looking to do in a strategic meeting like this one is to build a bigger, build a bigger plan for the future. Yes, we're going to talk about yesterday's ticket. We're going to talk about last week's problem if we need to, but we can't let that derail the entire meeting. Otherwise, our opportunities are just going to fall off the seesaw, right? So what we need to do is kind of let the customer know if we need to speak about issues last week's ticket, some underlying problem that's going to take us some time. Let's either parking lot that till the end of the meeting, or let's take that as a secondary meeting that we can get the right parties in. Maybe I can bring my engineers in and we can really get to the root cause of the issue. But we can't let the customer derail this meeting. If they take 15 minutes out of your agenda, you're never going to get back to where your objectives live. And you're probably never going to get to complete the roadmap discussion, which is where you get your benefit in the QBR, money coming back to you. So make sure you keep that meeting on track. The next thing, and this is one of my favorites, is bringing inconsistent data points or meaningless information. So everything we've done in VCIO Toolbox comes out of years and years of us making tons of mistakes, as I like to say. I drove my QBRs the many ways that all of you probably have. I brought reports, thud factor with a lot of performance data, and customers loved that. The first meeting, they were like, "Oh, cool! Never really saw this information before. Didn't know how we were operating. Didn't know we were doing this well." Next meeting, I would show it again. And then you would hear them go, "Good, we're tracking." Then I would get to the third meeting and I would basically hear not much of anything because they've seen that data before. It's not changing that much. They don't really, and really what it comes down to is they're getting nothing out of it. It's the old what's in it for me is not being met there. So that becomes a huge challenge for us. And if you look at that little picture on the right of these people, you'll notice you got one person that's kind of aghast, another person that's actually paying attention, another person that's just kind of sitting back, soaking it in, but not really feeling it all. And that's how many of your tables are going to be if you're not bringing the right information to pivot to everybody. So, I go from thud factor and performance reports to another thing I see as a, QBR killer all the time, going straight to the roadmap. It's a journey, right? When we all were looking at finding our soulmates in life, we didn't ask them to marry us 5 minutes after we walked in the room on our first date, right? We set a story. We courted a little bit. In the VCIO Toolbox vernacular, that's us working with our customers to understand what our joint strategy is. Do we even have the same likes and dislikes? What are the critical path that you think is important to your company for success? And how does that align with the things that we need you to believe in? Once we set that strategy, then we're building compromise, right? Because we're going to identify where gaps might be in our relationship. And we're tying it back to that strategy with ideas on how we can reinforce it. And once we've built that path and built that trust, now we can go in and ask for the hand in marriage, so to speak. So when you really think about the budget, that from that perspective, it really becomes one of, if you go straight to the money, you haven't helped them see the why or see the journey on what it's going to do for their business in terms of business outcomes. So we've got to work on that. And you've got, however you want to approach that story is fine. I give everything in VCIO Toolbox vernacular. But really, it's if you're not getting information and discovering in and letting that customer talk first, which again is a big part of them feeling that they're a participant in that meeting, then you can't present out and expect them to know why they want to do things and jump to it quickly. And that's where we get that friction that happens at sales time. Even though you've talked about a project for 6 months, your customer's still struggling with why should I do it? And if we haven't articulated that appropriately, they're not going to say yes, right? They're not going to accept your ring. You're going to be up on the jumbotron, embarrassed down on your knee and sad, man. So we got to work on really making sure that we get those data points there and we don't go straight to the money. And that really kind of leads into number 3, consistency from meeting to meeting. One of the things that my customer said to me when I was doing an MSP and I was doing it with PowerPoint or QBRs with PowerPoints and Excels and reports, like I'm sure many of you have in life, was it was tough for them to follow along because each time we came in, it looked slightly different. And as you know, as technical people, we're a team of tweakers. We love adjusting things and seeing if we can optimize and make things better. So when I looked back at some of the reports I was presenting to my customers, they weren't consistent from meeting to meeting. And these were generally non-technical people. So if we really didn't have that consistency and deliverable, it was tough for them to follow along. So make sure your data points are consistent, make sure you're telling a story along the way, and you're really helping the customer uncover the why on their terms. And if they can do that, they're going to keep coming back to your QBRs. And this kind of dovetails off of what we were just talking there about inconsistencies. But imagine you go the other side with reports that are way, way too technical. We're bringing in the acronym soup that you're seeing over on the left-hand side, where we've got all these lovely things that we want to take to them, but they don't know what they are. The customer's got no clue what MFA, ATP, SSPR, EDR, on-prem, all these great things that we love to say to each other as if, it's hello. It's too much for them. So you got to look at those reports and go, am I being very simple? Am I making a concise message? If you're doing presentations, will they understand that? Are they seeing the many ways that they're going to benefit from this? Do they understand that connection to their businesses? And over on the right-hand side, this is a little bit pixelated. I apologize for that. But you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, we've got, one of those, very big Visio maps detailing so much complexity that when you put that in front of a customer or any technical report for that matter, it's probably far and above what they're able to interpret and understand. So we really need to make sure that when we build our reports, that we're keeping them as simple as possible. Even in the world of VCIO Toolbox, we can build some pretty technical reports in our system. We can really go in depth with our, our gap analysis reporting and some of our deep detail. But if you go into our report designer, we have different ways you can slice and dice that same data for the right audience. If you don't want to show a really expansive roadmap with detail for each project, you could put it into a simple Gantt chart and month-to-month pricing format. You can put it in a simple grid where you're just showing project, price, timeline, and current status. So you can really adjust those reports to your audience and make sure you're speaking in the language of the person or people that are sitting around the table with you. Finally, the biggest killer is not putting a business to technology alignment. Why does a customer struggle to make a decision? Why are you getting sales friction at the end? Well, we already talked about it. If you're jumping on the money too quickly, that's a challenge. But the other one is if they don't understand what they're going to gain by doing it. Customers are looking for a return on investment, right? We all are. All of us are buyers. All of us go out and do things. When we're buying, we buy for three reasons: to save money, to make money, or to reduce risk, right? And if we are not able to articulate that very quickly, hey, by doing this project, it's going to help you do one of those three things over here in the right-hand column, the customer is going to struggle to get to yes. Yes, a lot of our customers will buy from us on pure blind faith because they trust us. And trust me, there is nothing more awesome when you've got deep trust with your clients and they truly value you as an advisor. But we work in the world of technology, right? I wake up every day. When I was an MSP, my running joke is I woke up every day, looked at my schedule in the morning and said, how much is this thing going to change by the end of the day, just due to the demands of the business? And we all know that we could wake up tomorrow and a technology event purely out of our control can impact our customers. We can quickly resolve it, but if they felt any pain at all, it is now going to take us time to rebuild that trust with them. So we need to make sure that if we need to continue to progress work during that period, that we're not seeing it slow down because we have to, rebuild the trust, as I just mentioned. We want to make sure that they can draw their own conclusions. And that's really what our whole strategy process is. By learning their goals and aligning our projects to the goal, we're in effect building the why statement for every single project. They now can see projects worth, project and project description. What is the priority as assigned by the MSP? What's the cost of this project? And what's it going to do for my business? What problems is it going to solve? What's it going to help support in our strategic initiatives? How am I going to gain something out of this? Because those gains often need to be communicated internally to get the yes from your partners as well. So this really becomes a very easy process of making this whole event much more consultative. If you take them through that journey, and again, if you're not sure what that journey is, go into your university inside of VCIO Toolbox, go to our coaching videos. I've done a couple now in storytelling. I'm big on, that whole concept of building a narrative and taking a customer from start to finish so they can make those conclusions and learn a little bit more about that. We want to make sure that they understand the why and they feel in control of that why from start to finish. So guys, those are the five big, those are the five big mistakes that we all make. It's that getting the right people in the room stage and making sure that they keep coming back. It's keeping that meeting on track and not letting your customer take control of the business review event, Give them other forums that they can control. It's making sure that you've got those consistent data points in the meeting, and we're removing meaningless information that can only confuse the customer. Keep it simple, and you know the other one. And then bringing in your reports that are too technical, stay away from that. We love to show the things that we're doing. We love to show the cool things that our tools do, but keep it really simple to what your customer needs to hear. And then finally, make sure they know the business gain. Help connect the dots. It's our slogan, right? Connecting the dots between technology and the business. And if you can do that, you're going to have a very happy customer who's going to trust you, who's going to engage you, and is going to make sure that that you don't go away. So I've got a couple of comments in here. Chris just shared to me, for many clients, I have a high-level relationship with the CEO. For a few, I have a CFO type contact. I wonder how you get connected with the CEO without insulting the CFO. So Chris, that is a great, great question, because there's always this feeling of, I don't want to reach past my person. I don't want to reach, I don't want to make them look bad. I don't want to step on their toes. We know sometimes when an MSP, especially if they've never had an MSP before and there's a point of contact, that person can have their guard up thinking that this could be something that could ultimately eliminate them. But what you got to do is work with your single point of contact. And we'll do some other workshops on this because I think there's some benefit to that as well. I think, what we really want to do is now start building a relationship with our single point of contact where you're asking them these kind of questions in advance of the event. Hey, where are you stuck? I know this project's been on the table and you haven't gotten acceptance and you've been frustrated on it. What's not clearly being conveyed to that CEO? How do you want to engage this? I can help support you on this. And trust me, it's my job to make you look good, not you make me look good. Maybe if we can get them in the QBR, we can, we can get his viewpoint on some things about risk, or maybe make them understand there's actually risk where it doesn't live, or whatever the case may be, so they understand that. So what you want to do is get your single point of contact to be the person that makes the invite to those higher level ranking officials if you don't have any kind of relationship with it, but do it hand in hand with them, where you really are saying to them, let me help you where you're stuck. Sometimes it just takes a fresh voice, right? Or what are your, really having almost an independent QBR with that single point of contact where you're like, where are your frustrations right now in the process? What things, if I gave you a Christmas wish list, if you had all the money in the world, could you do? Or all the time in the world, could you do? Or if your team would believe in it, you'd want them to understand and help them shape the story. I'm back to the story concept, to then bring those people favorably into the room. They know you're not trying to step past them. The CEO and CFO are getting exposed with the single point of contact as a backer. And now we can start building that relationship. And once that trust grows, you will get that direct line of sight to the CEO or CFO, because a single point of contact is no different than you, man. They got a day job also, and they've got plenty of activities to do. If you need something that's higher level, they just want to be in the loop. And as long as you're doing that, you should be able to get past that barrier. Now, Chris, I'm not going to tell you that's going to win for everybody. There's always those customers that you're just not going to get past that next stage, but, or get to those upper level people. And then you've got to be honest inside your own MSP with your own teams and go, look, this customer, we're in a great relationship now and it can continue forever, but we're not positioned well there. We're struggling. Leverage your CEO if you're not the CEO, right? Leverage your CEO, maybe just to make an CEO to CEO outreach call, just to see how he feels about how the onboarding of the engagement went, or how things been now that we've been with you for a year. Your CEO has a responsibility to protecting that revenue as much as any VCIO does. And maybe, and again, it's not as much of a stigma if you're not ramping up somebody that thinks you're a peer to go to that CEO directly, if you bring your CEO into the mix and let them have a parallel conversation. And then you can even get on the defensive if they get really, uppity about it. Oh, I didn't know that happened. Let me go check in on that. I know they're on an initiative right now where our CEO wants to just make sure that our key players are happy as well. So let me just see what that was all about. And you can deflect a little bit while you regroup as well. And yes, I see another comment here about bringing only the information that's useful to them. Less is more. We've all heard it 1,000 times, right? We don't need everything to be a very expanded conversation. If we can get things done with less, And I know you might not believe it the way I talk some days, but man, if you can get it done in 5 words, but rather than 10, that's always better. I like to use words, but all kidding aside, that's really how we can get better engagement with our customers. You got to build those relationships. I've already taken a note that we can talk about just relationship building and how to penetrate and posse up, if you will, and bring your team in. Other trainings we've done in the past for those of you that are new to the call, the Office of VCIO course and some of our Office of VCIO trainings is really where we look at VCIO toolbox at the VCIO not being a role but a process. And it's a tag team approach to building business relationships and engagement. And yes, does it potentially cost a little more? Maybe. Not if you're going to lose a key customer that then alters how your business is going to operate, right? Then it's probably a very worthwhile investment. So anyway, guys, we're near the top of the half hour. That is to the end of today's training here. Hopefully those 5 mistakes you saw yourself, well, if you saw yourself in one of those 5 mistakes, it's okay. I've been in all 5 of them. So, no harm, no foul there. Enjoy the rest of your day, all.